All right, so yesterday we talked about 7.1, 7.2, where you watched the video over there. Wait, you move right here. And Diego, move over one seat. That way, if something happens, we don't have to worry about that anymore. Okay. All right, so. Well, when she gets back, we'll change it. But right now, give us a chance to socially distance ourselves here. Okay. All right, so now we talked about 7.1, 7.2. You watched the video yesterday. Went over things like Washington being president and the Whiskey Rebellion. Those are kind of your two biggest things to take away from that. Okay. Today we're going to talk about Washington's farewell address. I know it barely touched on that just a little bit yesterday. We're going to talk about it kind of in a little bit more detail today. Then we're going to hit Alien and Sedition Acts, okay? And then John Adams becoming the second president. Okay, so here we go. The first political parties is the name of this lesson. So, opposing parties. We get, when George Washington took office, we didn't have political parties, okay? Like the word partisan we just had as a vocab word is, separate is loyalty to a party. So political parties developed during Washington's presidency. During his farewell address, which we'll talk about in just a minute, he warns against political parties. He didn't like it. Okay? Federalist and Democratic Republican parties held opposing views of the government. Okay, so I'll go ahead and highlight that one. Highlight Federalist and Democratic Republican parties held opposing views of the government. Now, don't get these political parties confused, okay? So I know right now our political parties that we have Democrats and Republicans, right? Everybody knows that. Yeah. So Federalists and Democratic Republicans, those are different from the ones we have today, okay? These are two different parties. This is one party, Federalists is one party, Democratic Republicans are one party, okay? Well, they're not two separate, those are just one, okay? Then President Washington was unable to ease conflict between the two parties. So remember, we talked about George Washington wanted neutrality. He wanted to be neutral, especially with the European conflicts, okay? And again, he didn't like political parties. He warned against them. He was very against political parties. So he wanted to, obviously, everybody be on the same side. You think back to the Whiskey Rebellion. He sent troops, federal troops, to shut down the Whiskey Rebellion to keep everybody on the same side. All right, does that make sense? So, obviously, he wanted the conflict not to happen, but he couldn't stop it. And then in 1796, a Federalist won the presidency, John Adams. Okay? So, now Washington's farewell address. All right? He left office after 2 terms. Okay? Too bad, you're going to turn it off. Or go to office. Now, Washington's farewell. He left the office after 2 terms, setting the precedent for future presidents. Okay, what does precedent mean? Anybody remember? It's a vocab word. You should have it written down. Riley?
Something governor said that something good was.
Right, so Washington set the example of only serving 2 terms as president. Okay? So only serving 2 terms, it wasn't a law, it was just a precedent set. Okay, so that everybody followed his example. Alright, so that was the biggest thing. I would highlight that bullet right there. Washington left after 2 terms in office, setting the precedent for future presidents to only serve 2 terms. Okay, that's a very important thing from his farewell address and the precedent that he set. Again, like he said, we said he earned neutrality towards foreign nations, and he warned against the creation of political parties because he was worried that they may separate the country. All right? Yes, Andrew.
Go back to the first bullet. So you're saying that wasn't an actual law?
Not until FDR. Yeah, remember, it's an amendment that was added after FDR was president. Okay. So yeah, a precedent is not a law; it's just an example, okay, of what to do. And so he warned against the creation of political parties. I would highlight that one too. Okay, that's another important thing for his farewell address. So going back all the way back to our first president, he was saying political parties are not the way to go. All right, and here we are now with the country divided between Democrats and Republicans. Yes, sir.
Why did they get rid of the Federalist Party?
It ended up dissolving. Those people didn't no longer follow those views. Okay, so now we're on to John Adams as president. Okay, now this is the second president of the United States. He's right after George Washington. Okay, the first thing that John Adams has to deal with is what's called the XYZ Affair. All right, and so the XYZ Affair nearly led to a war with France in 1797. Okay, so what was the XYZ Affair? So to understand the XYZ Affair, you got to kind of go back to what was called Jay's Treaty in 1794. Okay, I put all of that information down in the speaker notes for you guys. But Jay's Treaty happened in 1794, so before John Adams was president. Okay, it was a treaty with France to help the Americans with the Revolutionary, not with the British. Okay, kind of hold off the British. Now, that's kind of over there. We're going to kind of go resolve this issue. So, John Adams sent a team of Americans over to Paris, okay, to try to resolve what's going on. Well, France, the people in Paris basically said, no, we're not even going to meet with y'all. And so they went back. They went back to America. Okay, kind of upset that they didn't get anything fixed. Now, the French then sent 3 agents over to America to meet with the Americans. Okay, when those agents got here, they asked for a bribe and a loan for France. Okay, they wanted the bribe for themselves and the loan for France from America. And they were like, no.
Why would they be asking for a bribe?
They just wanted money, yeah. So, it was kind of like a no deal, no dice, see you later. And it really made John Adams pretty mad that they would come over and do that. All right? So, in response to the XYZ Affair, the United States created the Alien and Sedition Acts. So, why it's called the XYZ Affair, because in John Adams' official report, he referred to these 3 agents as Mr. X, Mr. Y, and Mr. Z. Okay, thus naming it the XYZ Affair, and that's why they all got rolled into this. Okay, so the reason the XYZ Affair is important is because it led to what is called the Alien and Sedition Acts. Okay, it created the Alien and Sedition Acts. I would highlight that bullet right there. Okay. Now, I'm sure it has nothing to do with that. Maybe just maybe he was singing out and said the last week. I really don't know. Yeah, I imagine it has something to do with that. So, and then the Democratic Republicans created resolutions declaring that these Alien and Sedition Acts were unconstitutional. Okay, and we will look at on the next slide at really what made these Alien and Sedition Acts unconstitutional. So, now I was going to say it again in the next slide, but the Alien and Sedition Acts were made up of 4 laws or 4 acts. Okay, so. And they were separate. Okay, so you'll see here the first one, Sedition Act, down here at the bottom in the dark blue. Sedition Act, it says it made it a crime to speak, write, or publish false, scandalous, and malicious criticisms of the government. Okay, does that sound unconstitutional? What are they taking away right there?
The speech.
Right, and what is that? First Amendment in the Constitution, right? So that's going to get that. Yeah, it is pretty unconstitutional, right? But they're taking away freedom of speech, right? That's pretty much freedom of press, right? And then so publishing false or scandalous, malicious criticism of the government. Yeah. So yeah, you could say you got a pretty good argument right there that that's unconstitutional. Okay. Now the Alien Acts. Okay. Alien Acts. What they did is they allowed the president to imprison aliens and send those he considered dangerous out of the country. Okay. Now, whether or not that was really unconstitutional, that was kind of a gray area. If somebody is actually dangerous to the United States, yes, you probably need to send them out, right? But then that kind of leaves it up to the discretion of one person if they give it all to the president, right? So, yes and no, more than likely, it is constitutional, it's not unconstitutional. So, and then they give it the Naturalization Act, which required that aliens be residents for 14 years instead of 5 years before they become eligible for U.S. citizenship. Okay, so they had to be in the United States for 14 years. All that did was raise the time you had to be living in America before you could become or apply for U.S. citizenship or be eligible for it. So 14 years. Now, this the red box over here explains why they were passed. They were passed because the Federalists controlled the Congress at the time. Okay, and the Federalists passed them to strengthen the federal government and silence Republican opposition. All right, so what they did that because it was kind of just like showing, we're the big boys, we're in charge here, we're gonna pass what we want to pass since we have more people in Congress, right? Now, the results of this, down here in the orange box, the results discouraged immigration and led some foreigners already in the country to leave. So it ended up making some people leave the country, which is not necessarily what they wanted. And it convicted 10 Republican newspaper editors who had criticized the federal government, Federalists in government. Okay? So it charged people of being guilty of this crime under the Sedition Act. All right? 10 newspaper editors. The reaction, opposition to Federalist Party growth, and led to a movement to allow states to overturn federal laws. Okay? So remember, the Articles of Confederation, we just talked about had all the power in the states, and they didn't have those in the federal laws. Now we changed it to the Constitution where the federal government has all the power, where you have to listen to the federal government. Okay? Now, there's a movement going on to allow states to overturn federal laws. We're going right back to where we just came from, right? So, they're going to try to, and that kind of gets nipped in the butt. It doesn't really get there, but that's just like one step forward, two steps back kind of deal, right? All right, and this kind of just goes over the same thing again, saying that the Alien and Sedition Acts were signed into law in 1798 by President John Adams. There were 4 laws. The acts changed the number of years a person had to be in the United States in order to be considered a citizen, increased from 5 to 14 years. The acts also allowed the president to imprison or deport illegal aliens and restrict negative speech about the United States government. These laws were intended to weaken the Democratic Republican Party. And in reaction to the Sedition Act, Alien and Sedition Acts was largely negative. The act helped contribute to the Democratic Republican victory in the election of 1800. So, highlight that last bullet right there. That's a pretty important part of that. Okay. So the Alien and Sedition Acts basically do the exact opposite of what they wanted them to do, right? So they were intended to weaken the Democratic Republican Party, but it really just turned everybody against the Federalists. And made the Democratic Republican Party strong. Okay? So any questions here about 7.3? Okay. So what we've covered so far, I mean, we're gonna have, you've still got a benchmark coming up. I mean, it's not gonna be it's gonna be your semester test, right? Say that with air quotes because it's gonna be in that week before, Christmas. But we don't have a whole lot left to go. You got 3 weeks after Thanksgiving break and all of next week. Okay, and that's all you have left of this semester. You've only got 4 weeks basically. Okay, and all we have left to talk about after today is the Louisiana Purchase and Lewis and Clark. Okay, so we should have some time to review before we get into the benchmark. Okay. And so everything we talked about since the last benchmark was going to be on there, starting with Articles of Confederation. Okay, so it's going to be a little bit of Articles of Confederation, Constitution. A lot of the Constitution is going to be on there. Okay, that's why we spent the last 3 weeks basically working on the Constitution with the amendments, Constitutional Convention, and everything goes into that. Okay, so Alien and Sedition Acts. Main thing you're going to get from this chapter on your benchmark is going to be George Washington becoming president, Whiskey Rebellion. Okay, why the Whiskey Rebellion was important? Because it established the government's right to tax the people. Okay, then we'll talk about Washington's farewell address. That's going to be a big one, and then the Alien and Sedition Acts. Okay, those will be the main points that will be on your benchmark. Okay, any questions about any of that? No? Okay, so what I want you guys to do now, you've still got however much time left. Work on Vocab Builder or Learn Smart. Okay, Vocab Builder due tomorrow, Learn Smart due Saturday. If you get them done, you don't gotta worry about it. Okay? So if you get them done, or especially Vocab Builder, you can turn it in, and you don't actually have to turn in Learn Smart because it does it automatically. Okay? So that's what you guys work on the rest of the hour. All right?
Do we want to already direct the
You can.